take you back to the year around 1850 in southern Ontario. It was quite different than what we have now. Most of the southern Ontario agricultural zone was already patented to private landowners, and a large number of trees had been cut. Thousands of acres were cut. In the 1850s, railways came into southern Ontario, and this then opened up all kinds of opportunities for transportation of this log material. So all kinds of sawmills started up, especially down in this part of the country. In 1871, in Simcoe County, there were over 114 sawmills operating. By that time, we had so much land cleared in southern Ontario that some of the farmers in southwestern Ontario that were growing peaches found that they could no longer grow peaches because the microclimate had changed. The area was getting windier, it was getting drier and colder. They also noted that streams were drying up. Streams that would run all year round were only running in the springtime, and they would shut down in the summer and then start up again the following year. So all of this was leading the public to know that something was going astray. The wind really blew the sand around. Sometimes people had to plow the roads to get rid of the sand. Like we think of snow plowing, well, it was sand plowing back then. And also on windy days, the farmers would report seeing black clouds of dust on the horizon. That would be sand moving its way across. There was an interest in planting trees provincially in 1871. The province passed an act called an Act to Encourage the Planting of Trees on Highways. The province would give municipalities a grant where the municipality could pay a farmer 25 cents per tree for each tree planted.
A lot of open space, which was pasturing for the cattle and one thing and another, but there was a lot of trees around as well. And with it, there were still sawmills around, which was cutting trees and using it for timber purposes too, you know. So with it, all in all, back in the early days, it was sort of a pioneer situation, you know, and people were living off the land more than they are today.
So in 1922, they launched a program called the Agreement Forest Program. What the agreement means is the province helps the municipality, or at that time the county, purchase the land that's been determined to be wasteland, blow sand, and then the government would help reforest the land, would keep track of the books. It'd be a 20 or 50-year lease agreement where the government did all the work but kept track of all the records. They would keep track of all the revenues and costs. So it was a business. Further, in 1923, because we were growing more trees and needed more trees for this Agreement Forest Program, Zavitz established the Ontario Tree Seed Plant in Angus, where cones were gathered for different parts of Ontario. The seed was extracted and sent to the nurseries.
First started here, the cones were put in drying sheds onto racks, and in many cases they were still partly green. They had to be turned, so we used a paddle to turn the cones over. We would bag the cones into jute bags, put them on trucks, transfer them to the old seed plant, carry them in there, and then we put them on racks. And the racks were pushed into a kiln where they were heated. And then we'd have to bring them out after they had opened properly and dump them down into a hopper. And the machine down below was a vibrator, and it would shake the seeds out of it, and the cones would go off to one side, and that's what we used to heat the kilns, was the extracted cones at that time.
In 1924, Midhurst Nursery was established just outside of Barrie, north of Springwater Park there, what we know as Springwater Park, and also at Orono, another nursery just south of Peterborough.
It was 17th of April 1957 that I started with Dalt Banning as the foreman for the Angus Forest. And there was about a crew of 12 or so used to ride in the back of the truck, and he'd take us to the job sites, and it was all hand planting. Well, there was a crew, there was always two people. One carried the pail and the other one carried the shovel and would dig the slot for the trees, and the other person that had the pail full of trees would put the tree in, and then the dirt was put back in and tramped, and on to the next step off 6 feet and plant the next tree. It was furrowed. I remember we could plant 1,200 trees a day, the two of us. And that was a lot of trees at that time, like for 1,200 trees a day. I was still working out of Angus Forest, the headquarters Angus Forest, but we used to plant all over Simcoe County. And I planted at Ower Lake Forest on a machine. That would be the second year, I think that was 58. I got promoted to a machine planting job, and I was on the planter.
Trees up at Midhurst, but they're done up in bundles about 25, I think, and then that was into another big bundle with whatever because they could pack in it, you know. They were in wooden crates at that time. To start with, Midhurst delivered them to the area, and we planted them there. But later on, we got to a truck on our own, like, and then wherever we were going, we just took the trees down with us and planted them from there. Well, mostly planting trees in the spring, and then you'd have to what they call insects, red pine, white pine weevil, where the bugs would sting the leader in the tree, so you had to cut them out and destroy them so that it wouldn't spread. And then they'd go, the fire guards, they had to make sure that they were worked up so the fires wouldn't spread off the road to the plantation. And then they cut wood in the wintertime and logs.
Well, my job in the summertime was more or less keeping your fire guards net around outside to the properties, plowed and discs, and so I was on the tractor for the whole summer doing that.
And in the 1990s, the government decided that these forests now were maturing, and it was time to turn back the ownership and management to the owners. So during the several years in the 1990s, mid-1990s, action took place where these agreements were signed back to the owners, and the owners actually owned the forest all that time, but now we're managing the forests. And many have done an excellent job, such as Simcoe County, which actually use money from the revenues produced from the production of wood and wood products to buy other lands and continue to plant.
The biggest success stories, and it's been a success right from 1992, is the actual county forest, the development of the county forest system and etc. Not just from the county's point of view, but from a provincial point of view, resident point of view, recreational point of view, timber sales, etc. So it's been a success story right from the beginning. I always took pride in the revenue that was generated. From 1996 onward, we basically averaged, I think in the 11 years I was here, we averaged $1.2 million a year in revenue. Firstly, it's the largest municipally owned parcels of land throughout Ontario and likely Canada. Value of the county forests from a timber revenue perspective will continue to go on for years. The conifer plantations, the long-term management plan is to convert those to hardwood stands, and eventually those hardwood stands will be thinned. So everything will, there'll be revenue being produced for years to come.
And if you look back into the history of the county forest, it was through the 20s, 30s, 40s when and into the 50s when it really expanded quickly. And that's when there was the really big, serious push to get a lot of the wastelands in their day back into forest cover. But even over the last 5 years, we've been able to continue to reinvest in the forest and continue growing that land base. And that's something that is really unique in Ontario and probably in all of Canada with a municipal forest of this type. It's all those years of good management and proper stewardship have led to the ability to continue to grow.
So a lot of breakthroughs were made on county forests. As well, researchers used them to establish growth plots. We would put in plots, measure the trees, study them, and as a result of that, tables were produced in a publication, Managing Red Pine. Many of the techniques, many of the ideas of thinning and harvesting were developed in Southern Ontario County Forests and then transplanted northwards. So really this was a learning base for foresters all across Ontario.
I helped do that, and it does give you a lot of pride.
Think about what we're going to leave behind for future generations. That's so important, not to sit on our laurels, but to be able to continue to grow like that is just a tremendous achievement, and it speaks a lot to the commitment from council and from the support that we get from the public as well.